ready.
I'm ready.
The link?
Yes. You on YouTube? Continue
I
on
was
YouTube.
posting to my Instagram.
All right.
It's so nice.
I'm going to put it in the private chat. Okay. You should have it now.
Okay. Thank you.
Are we
All
live?
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
We are live.
35 seconds now.
Over here late. Okay, if we're ready, I will do some intros.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Oof. Hey everyone, it's your girl Amanda the author, and thank you for joining me on this special live stream today where we're talking about how to write a fantasy series. I am joined here by my lovely friends here at the Right Talk. Ladies, if you'd like to introduce yourselves.
So which one of y'all going first?
Oh, hi. I'm Tidra. My author name is Ellen Reynolds. And of course, you can find me at Words Can Sing Too, almost everywhere.
My name is Writer's Crush, also Sheena. You can find me on the Right Talk webpage, and you can also find me at Writer's Crush on IG.
And I'm One Minute Edit. I'm on IG, but there's nothing posted, so yeah.
Before we get started, Tedra, have I been pronouncing your name wrong this whole time? Because I pronounce it Te and not Tidra. So, and you just let me do that and not corrected me?
Well, you're not by yourself.
I mean,
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, y'all all do it.
what?
This is a friendship confession
like,
here.
Well, it's because my dad's side calls me Tedra and my mom's side calls me Tidra. So it really it doesn't matter.
But
I'm
okay,
so
but what do
angry at you right
you
now.
prefer?
I introduce myself as Tidra.
Okay. Well, it's nice
Oh,
to meet
that's
you, Tidra.
funny.
Tidra, yes.
Hello, Tidra. Okay, here we are.
Oh my god.
Oh.
We're gonna talk about fantasy.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be mad this whole show. Go ahead.
Oh, that's funny.
Do your
Well,
thing,
thank you again, ladies, for joining me. I'm really excited to talk about today's topic. We are talking about how to write a fantasy series. So, for those of you who have not heard of the Right Talk, who would you like to introduce it, or do you want me to take a crack at introducing y'all and the awesome things that you do for the
Nah,
people who are
Tidra got it.
What? Oh, okay. Well, the Right Talk is a platform for Black speculative fiction writers. We basically just want to help you write your book, right? We all have questions. We all have things that we go through while we're writing our book, and we don't necessarily have anyone to talk to about it or anyone who looks like us that talks about it. So we just want to just help you write, help you get those thoughts out. We want to help you. We just want to be a support system for you in a community. And that's what our platform is about. We have a Facebook page that has a ton of resources for you. The Right Talk YouTube is sort of like this. We are just a panel of people who get around together and talk about all of our favorite fantasy related things. We go off topic a lot, but it's supposed to be a conversation, right? It's supposed to be a conversation. So we just talk, and that's just it. We want to make sure that you feel like that you're home when you're here with us, and you can come to us with whatever question that you have about writing a book. We're not experts, but I think that's what makes it a little bit perfect because we aren't experts, and we're all just trying to figure it out, just like you are. So yeah, I hope that says it.
That was wonderful. Everybody, go ahead and follow them on their own YouTube channel at the Right Talk. It's a monthly shows. How often are you? They do shows pretty frequently.
Yeah, it's every 2 weeks. We do have like spring, summer, winter breaks, I believe. But yeah, for the most part, it's every 2 weeks.
every 2 weeks that you can get a new show. They have done some really wonderful topics. I was really excited and blessed to be able to connect with them last year. It's been over a year now since
Wow.
we've
Oh
done since we did
wow.
our first show when we talked about vampires. We've spoken about witches as well, lore, research, and things like
Mhm.
that. So you can catch those shows on the Right Talk, but today we are on my channel because we are talking how to write a fantasy series. And you'll know that I have written 2 out of the 3 books in my fantasy series, and we have some other folks here
Sheena,
writing fantasy
writer
series,
crush.
including Sheena. So, what a better time? There's no better time to talk about how to write a fantasy series. So this is for all of you who are doing that and want some tips and tricks and just want to feel like you're not alone if you have any questions. Hey Montrez, happy
Hey
early Halloween,
girl.
girl. So yeah, I think let's get started. Enough of the preamble. Everybody watching this is probably like, you're boring as shit. Come on, give me the details. Let's go.
I have a ton of questions. I'm excited to learn from y'all and figure out how, because I don't I'm a pantser. So, and I
Mhm.
think I came to the realization today that I probably needed to plot out some other parts of my books
Oh,
for this series I'm writing. So I'm here and eager to learn. I got my pen ready.
oh, look at you.
So she said, "Look at you."
Yeah, I'm taking notes. All right. Well, yeah, let's get started. So, I think our first question here is let's see, we introduced ourselves. So subgenres. Let's talk different types of fantasy here.
There are
That
so many. Like I didn't even realize that before I
Mhm.
started writing. Like every time
Oh
you
yeah,
find
makes
one,
sense.
there's subgenres to that subgenre. I was like,
Hmm.
like the
Hmm.
dystopian. There's tons of those. Did not know.
I
Oh yeah.
know. What happened to just like having just a good book? Why we got to figure out like all of this other extra stuff? And it plagued me when I first started writing, trying to figure out where my books fit, especially this book, because I
Mm.
think the rest of my books are like, I think, or at least the ones that I was writing were clear cut like urban fantasy, and then this one you have like mixes of like gothic and paranormal, and it's like, well, where does it fit?
Hmm.
I don't know. Still don't know.
Yeah. And I think it can be hard to figure out where it fits, especially if we're talking about genre representation, and then if you go to query or when you're trying to add those
Mhm.
keywords on Amazon, how difficult it can be to figure out the genre. Montrez is over here in agreement with us. It's such a rabbit hole. um, Fantasy especially, I don't, and it's funny is it makes me wonder if it's just, are we just gluttons for punishment writing in a genre that is so vast, or does romance have so many different niche,
I feel
subgenres
like
on
you just write
subgenres.
what you're gonna write, and people will come to you. You know, I look at the
Yeah.
first thing I look at is like, oh, does the cover appeal to me? So if the cover appeals to me, and then I go and look at the blurb, and if that's good, then I'm gonna read it, regardless if you have dragons or ghosts or romance or not. Romance is always a plus, but like a good story is what should draw you no matter what, especially because you don't want to get stuck reading just one specific genre. You don't want to get stuck just writing one specific genre. Like it's good to kind of just open yourself up a little bit. I mean, that's how you learn. You learn from seeing what other people are doing out in the world and the writing world, I should say. So you might
Hmm.
as well.
So if we were to categorize some of the main genres of fantasy, what I would say probably urban is
Hmm.
one with
It's a big one.
and I think underneath urban would be what contemporary. I hear a lot of people talking about contemporary and then urban, and from what I understand, the differences are that urban mainly takes place in a city, whereas like
Mm.
contemporary is just any kind of modern fantasy. But what do y'all think? Is that a pretty accurate definition there?
Yeah,
That's what
I
I've
agree
heard.
with that.
Yeah.
Because I think contemporary is anything from like, well, that may shift because if you think about it, like in the 90s, contemporary would have been anything like from the 40s up. So I don't know if that shifts now that we're moving into the 2000s. So we may not be like people who were born in the 80s and 90s may not be contemporary any longer. I'm not trying to make this thing called like the late 1900s anymore, but that may be an actual thing.
What about that thing y'all said about somebody saying 90s was historical fiction? And we all
Yeah.
died.
Oh my God.
I'm so salty
I saw
about it
that
though.
again.
Like,
I just started
really?
laughing. So horrible.
How dare you? The
That was
audacity.
my childhood. How dare you?
Right. Oh my god.
Oh, historical
So
fiction.
we have urban fantasy, which is modern. We have epic or high fantasy, which is, what you're
Brittany's
thinking of.
like, yeah.
Brittany's favorite thing. We're talking about it's things like Game of Thrones. We have Lord of the Rings. Obvious.
Mhm.
I would say Raybearer is epic fantasy. I would say Children of Blood and Bone is epic
Lord of the
fantasy.
Rings.
Lord of the Rings. And just to further clarify for everybody, urban fantasy can also have detective and police procedural elements. They also have supernatural creatures as well. So,
Oh yeah, that's right. What's his name?
yes.
Oh, I forgot.
Is
Henry
Constantine?
Dresden or something like that.
Oh, the Dresden
Harry
Files.
Dresden. Yeah.
Harry Dresden, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I would consider Constantine like urban fantasy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Urban fantasy, paranormal or something.
Or it could be superhero fiction because apparently that's its own genre.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did not know.
So how would y'all define like high fantasy, epic fantasy? Is it mostly like because I read a book like a long time ago where it started out urban, um, and then they moved into like another world. I guess that would be like portal magic or whatever, but they moved into another world and all of a sudden they were on this like great big adventure. So is epic fantasy like set in like a different world where you are traveling across like, mountains and carrying on? That's what I think when I think epic fantasy.
What do you
I
think,
think
Brittany?
I think epic fantasy primarily focuses on like the scope and breadth of the world that the characters are in, whereas high fantasy I think typically focuses more on the characters just who happen to be in another world, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like it's not real at
Okay.
all. Because I think the
Yeah.
other end is called low fantasy, and that's more of your um, Indian in the cupboards where it takes place in our
Yeah.
world, but they have like fairies and stuff, like things that I like. So I guess I would be a fan of low fantasy, whereas
Oh
opposed to,
wow.
yeah, I didn't like I said when we were talking. There's so many different genres. So if we move into higher epic, I just found a list while I'm talking to y'all. There's like 17 different subgenres, and that's not even their subgenres. And I'm just like, why? Why is that? It's so much. I'm like I'm reading it. I'm
Wow.
like,
Everybody has a
magic
thing.
realism. The
Yeah.
one that is confusing me right now is there's low fantasy and magic realism. So it
Right.
says
Oh,
low
I love
fantasy
magic
set in the world,
realism.
but is that not the same as low fantasy? Because wouldn't that take place in the real world? Like, why does that need a separate name?
I don't
I
think
don't think so.
no, I think that would be separate. Like, was it magic? We say magical realism, or what was
I
it?
don't quite understand what
Magical
low
realism.
fantasy
There's low
is, but
fantasy and magical realism. I
I
don't
think
understand the
magical
difference.
realism, whereas low fantasy would have like maybe this random fairy in it. Magical realism, I think, will still cater to it being more so a possibility as opposed to something as overtly fantastical as a fairy. Like you might have more supernatural elements or like spiritual elements that could be categorized as magical realism. Just as long
Yeah.
as it's not extreme.
I think it's also magical realism is I would say it's more literary than any other type of fantasy where you I think there's more parallels there. I'm trying to think of a good example of magical realism, but I've definitely feel like a lot of Latinx authors write magical like fantasy.
mm,
There's a kind of a big movement there of
yeah,
magical realism.
I've noticed that.
Um, Yes, I'm really trying to think. I have not.
It is. I remember. Okay, so the one that always comes to mind that I know most people will recognize is the one in I think it's Men in Black 2, where the girl is when she gets sad, it rains. Like to me, that would be an example of magical realism because you don't really. It's something that you. It's something that you would. It's so ordinary, but it's a little extraordinary once you're explaining like your emotions actually control the weather.
Yeah.
So it's like an innate ability as opposed to like a given ability.
Yeah, like one or yeah, like
Isn't it
one.
also? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, there was another. There's a book. So okay, Sarah Addison Allen is a magical realism writer. Um, Fantastic author. So y'all should definitely check her out. But in one of her books, like the lady actually, she cooks with intention. So like if she wanted cupcakes to make you fall in love, she would cook with that intention into her cupcakes and then give it to you. And you would give that cupcake to whoever you wanted to fall in love with you or something like that. Like that's how I love
She ain't
those
got no
books.
lottery cupcakes. Like
They did not ask for that actually.
Isn't it also where
okay.
I feel like with magical realism, the magic is more commonplace, and it feels like it's more heavy on the magic and not so much on the creatures, if that makes
Right.
sense. And so it feels like magical realism is just okay, there just is magic
It
steeped
just
in this
is.
entire world. Whereas with a lot of
Mhm.
urban fantasy content, there's this kind of thread of you have to hide your magic, you have to hide the magical underground kind of thing. Oh, Kyla coming through with a good rec. 100 Years of Solitude, I think, is a popular magical realism book.
What
I haven't read that one.
oh
Thank
what,
you, girl.
what is
Yes,
that
and
one?
Mantra seconds this.
Dr. Norrell, I think. Would that be magical realism? I
Oh,
can't
I
remember the
Who?
whole title. Dr. Norrell, I can't remember the name of the book.
Do you know how to
And
spell Noro? Because I can look it up.
I'm probably saying it all sorts of wrong. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell.
oh, right, right.
Would that be considered magical realism? I haven't read it in a while.
I haven't read it at
Sounds
all.
like it would. So,
Oh, I write
well,
that
in
down.
addition to magical realism, right, we have dark fantasy, which is fantasy that Sheena writes, and it takes elements of horror along with the fantasy. So it's I would say probably one of more of my favorite subgenres of fantasy is because I like horror just as much as I like fantasy. So I like it when they're mixed as well. We also have things like dystopian um, and utopian. I feel like is also kind of the flip side of that. Um, is there any other kind of genres of fantasy we want to speak to? Because we could do a whole show just talking about the different genres of fantasy here.
Yeah, because there's also sword and sorcery and fairy tales
Mm-hmm.
and Southern Gothic, which I absolutely
Fables.
love, which I
Yeah,
feel like more
Yeah.
people should do.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah. So I think probably maybe in the future that could be a fun show to do is just to discuss all the different genres of fantasy and give some recommendations in those different subgenres for
Oh,
everybody,
that
like
would be nice.
clarify.
Hmm.
So I don't know. We'll circle up after this and see if maybe that'll be another collab because
Yeah, summer thing. You
that
know.
sounds fun. So now let's kind of move into we've talked about fantasy, and even if we're talking about high fantasy and low fantasy, I firmly believe all fantasy needs world building. I don't think it's
Mhm.
possible to write anything fantastical without doing at least a little bit of world building if you're a Cancer. So
Brittany's a fan.
so let's talk a little bit about what it takes to world build and some of the more important aspects of that, including like hierarchy. So naming your creatures and people in your story, landscapes, maps, vegetation, all of that stuff. What do you think are some of the tenets of world building for fantasy? Any kind of fantasy.
Everything.
Take it away, Brittany.
Yeah, I was just saying everything. Like I like high fantasy, so it's basically building the world from the ground up, and you don't always need to like know exactly every molecule of everything in your story, but I kind of like doing that. So,
She
like,
really
I come up
do.
with my own. I come up with my own creatures, like their dynamics. Like right now, I've decided to, for one of the stories that I'm working on, um, the 4 different groups that I have, I decided to base the groups off of the personalities of like the firstborn, secondborn, thirdborn child, and the only child. So that's kind
That's
of
cool.
how
Right.
the groups behave collectively with each other. So
So wait, does
th-
each family's like firstborn all act the same? Is that what you're saying?
not exactly the same. Like co- as a group, the personality of the group would be defined as this, but they have their own individual personalities. Kind of
Gotcha.
like if you think about like Japan, people will typically think, oh, Japan, the people are quiet. But not every single person in Japan is a quiet type person.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Oh,
So it's kind of
nice.
that.
Yeah. I
I
think
can't
it's
help y'all with
important.
world building at all, so I'm just gonna
Yes, you
let y'all
You
can.
do it.
can.
Yes,
You
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 can.
can,
can.
I don't know
absolutely.
my world until my world revealed itself, so that's not building. That's just like
But
writing down. That's not
but you
doing
But
have a
it.
world now, so like
but
you can
your
speak
world,
on it.
yeah, your world has rules. There are things that can and cannot occur, and even
Hmm.
if you're, I guess a tip, a world building tip would be if you are a pantser and you are capable and able to think of things on the fly, then you can world build as you go along. Is that something that you did, Sheena, when you were writing? Kind of did the world building as you went along?
I wish I could say yes. So for the pantsing process, you start writing. At least for my pantsing process, I start writing, and as I write, the words you know how some people can see things visually, like if you watch or look at something, you can see like this whole movie. I can't do that. I think there's a word for it. It's like aphantasia or something. I absolutely
Mm.
can't do that. So instead, like if you say the word blue, you'll see the color blue. For me, when I see the word blue, I see like the actual word blue. So
Oh
Right.
wow, okay.
it like
Okay.
the words pop up into my head, and I have no idea what's going to happen until like it actually gets on there. It may not be that by the time I'm finished writing, but at the end, I guess I have to go back and make sure everything agrees. So I guess that may be where the world building might come in, because
Hmm.
if something starts as one way and it's not the same by the end, then it can't be a cohesive story. So I think that's probably the
Right.
most world building I do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big factor of world building is consistency. And I know we would all agree, I know Brittany especially would agree with like making sure your world building is consistent throughout the whole story, and that's one of the reasons for rewrites is to do that. Then I would try not to worry about it too much on the first draft because then you won't
Right.
move on. But
Take notes
um
though.
exactly, yeah.
Definitely take notes. I like writing in Word, and they have Word gives you the option to do like the navigation panel and like the comments. So I'm always doing like making new comments as I go, um, especially with names and stuff because it changes. So you highlight you highlight names that of your characters. You highlight what job you gave them, and you just kind of make a note by all of that stuff, like, hey,
Mhm.
they visited such and such on this place, we might need to revisit this, and you just highlight it, make a little note and set it aside, so when you come back to for your rewrites, it's all just right there inside your document. So I love it.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good idea. I'm doing that now with a book I'm writing now. I did not do that with my other books. So this is a new learning process for me.
How did you
I
do it?
say what?
How
Oh,
did
with
you
my
write them though? How did you figure out, like, if you didn't take notes and all that, like how did you figure out and keep up with the world, because there's a lot going on.
so I with all with with my fantasy series, both To Astera with Love and To Lars and Desperation, I first created kind of like a book Bible, if you will. It's just a big ass Google Doc where I have all of the things written down about the magic system. Um, the magic is elemental, so I've written down which powers correspond with the elements. I wrote down some of the history of the things in the book, like the Witches' Council. I wrote down notes with history of American politics because that was not something I was going to remember off the top of my head. And as I was writing and started incorporating more elements, so in the second book there's a power stripping ceremony. Well, I didn't have that written down for the first book, so going into the second book, I added that into the Bible of what that would look like. So I think another tip would be to make sure if you're since you're writing a series, that you're constantly updating that, and that you're not just a one and done, because you'll probably want to add more magic or mysticism into your series as you go along. With a current book I'm writing, I'm leaving myself a lot of notes because I'm kind of plotting pantsing this, and that I feel like I've gone so far away from my outline that my brain hurts. So I'm having to use notes now because I don't know where I'm at. I feel like that John Travolta gif where he's in Pulp Fiction and he's just like, that's me right now.
Oh yeah, same. I feel like I've gotten back to that part. Because I had to start all over and like going back and looking at my manuscript, and I feel like I've gotten to that part where I was first confused at like, where is this story going now? This isn't what I wrote down, and
Thanks.
so it's okay. I'm trying to figure it out, trying to make it work. I think I've got it, but it is a little confusing when your words and your characters kind of stray from what you originally wanted for them. It
Mm-hmm.
sucks, but I think it'll make the story better,
I
regardless.
I think so, and I think that I'm fine with it as long as it's not a situation of um like the magic straying or the kind of the
Mhm.
basic tenets of what I've already the foundation is straying. All of that's still firmly in place. So I think, making sure that whatever it is you're writing, whatever your writing style is, that you're able to world build along with that writing style, whether that's world building as you go along or having a book Bible or whatever you want to call it ahead of time and constantly
Mhm.
updating that, or writing and then kind of cultivating that in the rewrites. As Sheena said, there's multiple different ways you can do it.
Yeah,
As long as you're making sure that your world building is consistent and makes sense. And we don't necessarily mean it has to conform with reality, right? So
right.
by so like me saying make sure your world building makes sense. What is that? What would you think? Well, what springs to mind for you saying that?
Think of it like sports games, okay? Like in football, one aspect of it is you have to run the ball down the field, get into the touchdown to score. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then there's basketball. It also uses a ball. However, you can't just run down the court with the ball. You have to dribble down the court with the ball and shoot it in because you will get a flag. So, if you're playing football, don't incorporate basketball rules because then it doesn't make sense. It's not football.
That needs to be on a sticker or a
Oh,
t-shirt.
that makes sense.
I really appreciated that analogy. I was like, oh,
Right?
Yeah.
he said football's like, let's see where she's
Oh,
gonna take this because I don't know nothing about that.
that's so funny.
Like at its most basic, like, and you can't dribble the football down the field. Like
I
that's not
mean, you
going to
could,
work.
but you ain't gonna do it. Exactly.
Oh, I remember. I think we said something before. Like if you, I think Brittany said this too. She was like, I think if your character didn't know how to fly, like in the first one, and then he all of a
Yeah.
sudden knew how to fly and save the day, it's like you didn't explain why, and you didn't explain why your character all of a sudden knew how to fly. Like, you can't do that.
Don't do
Yeah.
that.
People will call you out.
Like foreshadow, foreshadow. If the character is going to get a new superpower or just anything new that's going to be significant, especially if it's going to get them out of trouble, significant trouble, then you need to foreshadow that, oh, there is a possibility they're going to be getting this thing later on in the book.
It's very similar to if we're talking about all of those shows and movies and books, even that includes magic. So I predominantly write books with witches. My series has vampires as well. I plan on writing vampire books in the future, but there will always be some kind of magical thread. So in my series, magic is elemental. There's not necessarily a personal gain element like the Charmed. There is limitations to what they can do. They can't just do, they don't just have unlimited power. They don't just have the ability to do every power. That's what spells and potions are for. But my main character, Mercury, is starting to acquire powers from some of the elements that he does not belong to. And I started laying the groundwork for that in book 1. So to Brittany's point of foreshadowing and laying that groundwork, doing that intentionally and not as oops. And then your readers
for
are
Mercury too. I'm not gonna lie.
looking back and not seeing that through line there. And bringing it back to like in Charm, the issue of personal gain. They can't do magic for personal gain. In American Horror Story, this extends to horror. This extends to any kind of fantasy, right? In American Horror Story, if you're a ghost and you die in a location, your spirit is trapped there. That's why they have the murder house, and that is a consistent through line. So making sure that you are maintaining these through lines and consistency there. That's what we mean by making it realistic. So now that we've kind of gotten that out of the way, let's talk point of view. Do you have a preference for a series? Do you think it matters whether you write a series in first person, third person, whatever? Or is this just something that's more up to writing style than anything else?
I like first
Writing
person.
style. Go ahead.
I should pull a Brittany and hit the mute button. No, I like first person. I always try to I tried to write in third person before, and it just never, like, the story never sat right with me. And then I would have to go in, and then once I went and changed it to first person, it was always like it flowed easier for me. So I guess that's my preferred POV.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here. My camera just died. Sorry.
You're good.
I see.
I'm the opposite. I like third person.
Really? Is your new book is Transcendence in third person?
Yeah.
Nice.
I think eventually I will do. I have one idea that is better suited to first person, and I will be coming to you when I do that because I don't have as much experience writing first person. Every time I've tried to write first person in the past, it sounds very much like a Dear Diary moment. I hate this. I hate this person. They're a jerk. So I definitely will need to brush up on how to craft a narrative in the first person. So
my third person sound like that. I feel like I tell everything instead of actually writing a story. I feel like it's all like step by step by step by step.
What about you, Sheena?
Third person mostly. Every once in a while I'll write in first person, but I like the bird's eye view that third person gives. So it feels like you're able to see all of the moving pieces as you're as you're writing. And for me, that I find that helpful.
I agree. I think that's another reason why I like third person. We we have the option of third person omniscient, which is where you're writing from multiple different third persons, and that could be,
Fave.
switching. Oh, we discovered Sheena's
Okay.
there.
Like,
I got
yes,
excited.
I am. That's the best.
Oh.
Like, if I'm going to describe someone being mad, I want them to be mad directly at what I'm being mad at. I don't want there to be any confusion about who's upset at who. Like, someone's going to get cussed out, the right person's going to get cussed out. Just saying.
Okay. Have y'all ever tried writing in second?
I've never even seen somebody write in second. Like, what does that even look like?
It's a mess. I tried writing in it. I wrote a short story in it because sometimes I write erotica, and I feel like my erotica is always my like testing ground for different stuff.
Mhm.
So I was trying to write one in second person, and it was weird as all get out.
What pronouns are you using for that?
Like like you and for mine I was talking to I think I did it right. Like I was telling my story like I was telling it to like for you, I guess.
Mm.
Like instead of saying Amanda, I would say you did, or you
Oh.
said, kind of like that.
Oh, so it's like when
It
we write the prompts. That's for second person.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's
Okay. All
right.
right. Well, that makes sense.
it feels like
Gotcha.
it could be good if you're doing something that was very directly like erotica or even horror. I feels like second person would lend itself to those genres because they're so, I don't know, more visceral, more like
Yeah,
you
putting you
can,
right in there.
yeah.
Hmm.
So we've just,
Look, her ears are turning. She's like, I'm going to
I
stop
was like, I was
she's
trying to
like my
picture
new
that
horror
in horror, and
series.
I'm like,
it.
ooh. Like, I don't want to be that closer to it.
Okay.
I'm like, we don't have to, like, I'm okay with reading it. I don't need to be involved in it. Like, I'm fine.
See, we
Isn't
have
that?
somebody that agrees. Second person is interesting, definitely great for erotica or horror.
See. Okay, good. Yeah, I tried it for that erotica. That's the only story that's like that.
I'm glad you can write erotica. I have a horrible time doing that. I'm like, well, I don't care how anybody else feels. That's probably I'm single. That's
But that's
That's
why I
fine.
tried it because I didn't know how to write it. I hated my I hated my sex scenes in my book, so I decided to learn how. And so it's honestly my erotica is really just me learning how to write erotica.
Yeah. I think that's important to have things where you, like you said, it's a testing ground and not everything you write ends up, I think, seeing the light of day, I guess.
Hmm.
I
thank
think it's
God.
important to have I certainly have like my father-in-law had said trunk novels where it's like you write it, you throw it in the trunk, maybe you take it out later, maybe you just, it never sees the light of day, but it's all a test and it all helps you be a better writer anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's my short stories. Just a mess.
So we've talked about point of view. Now let's talk about plots and timelines, and I think different types of journeys. Wow, why did I just? Why did I just stutter? Why was that my life just now?
Okay.
Um, so let's talk about things like the hero's journey or non-traditional hero's journey. And also let's talk about whether your series should be plot driven or character driven because you are writing multiple books and what is better for that type.
Mm.
So let's
What?
start with the hero's journey versus non-hero's journey.
Well,
What are
it.
we thinking for series?
I'm sorry. Say it again.
What do you think is better in a series?
Well, it depends on the author or the writer, because not everybody's going to do the hero's journey style. Um, but I don't mind the hero's journey. Um, and it can work for a series, but you just have to make sure you pace your things and have stuff stretched out if you're going to do a series, especially if it's going to be a long series. Like your typical series is what, maybe 3 books? But if you're going to do something like Harry Potter, then you really need to start considering how you're going to keep it interesting for that long. You know, what their character development is going to look like. How are they going to, you know, gradually develop across all 3 to 7 books, you know? So like, I guess just look at how people develop in real life. Like what are some things that are constantly changing in their life? What are some other elements that you can add to spice things up? So I guess with the hero's journey, I guess in your opinion, would you have it sectioned off, like they have it sectioned off, like the beginning part where, you know, the departure into the world, you know, going through the what is it called? Like the gatekeepers, I can't remember the word that they use, up until like the middle point. Hold on, let me look it up because I haven't looked at it in a while. Hero's journey.
Sheena, your mic is cut off.
Hey, you mean
Sorry. So what other journeys are there besides the hero's journey?
I mean, we have. I think it's. Let's scroll back up. Hero's journey.
There's this,
non-traditional.
It's more like, I think you probably look at the structures, like the act structure. So hero's journey is kind of like an act structure. So like you got your 7-act structure, and I think they have one that has 3, and then like there's like a bunch of different ones.
I saw one on there that had like 7 to 12 steps or something you're supposed to say.
But they're all pretty much the same. It's just people just use different terms for the same thing.
Yeah. I would agree. I mean, I think you're right. If you're doing a hero's journey, you definitely have to space the things out because you're going from the departure or the call to adventure, and then there's usually always a moment of them doubting themselves. There's usually the moment where they persevere. There's the moment where they face against a villain. And how many times can you replicate that if you're doing it in each book? Or are you doing that across the entire series where, let's say, the first book is, you know, their call to adventure, and maybe it ends with like a 80s style montage, if you will, of like them learning skills, and then the second book is, you know, them actually on the adventure. I think it's a good idea, and there's something I think good to think about what you want your character to experience over the course of the series. You should know how many books you're going to write, I think. Would we say that's important before starting the series?
Yes.
To know how many books you're going to write.
So you can properly space stuff out, so you can foreshadow properly. You know, because I think there was one author, can't remember her name, but she has like a little cult following, and her books are, you know, simple but good. It's a fantasy book. I think it's Greenwriter, and I don't know if she has it planned out or not, but some of the readers kind of got irritated with her 4th book because of certain, I guess, elements she wanted her character to explore. So, I mean, there's that. If you're going to have your character do something that's kind of out of character or that you didn't build towards in the previous books, then you, I think, will need to handle that carefully, because it can turn like your readers off. Like they've been, you know, maybe happy-go-lucky for 3 books, but there was nothing that happened in the 3rd book that will certainly have them all depressed and morbid and want to go bad guy-ish, you know. So
a good example of that is Game of Thrones, the 8th season, where all of a sudden Khaleesi decided she was going to murder everybody, and you're just like, but she was freeing people like a season ago. Like, what happened? Like, there's nothing. There was no jump from here to there. Just an awkward sex scene with her nephew. Like, that's it. Nothing led to this to here. Like, it was Like, what happened?
If we can only forget that last season.
I know. I saw somebody splice together, you know, in the scene where she's sitting on her dragon and she's kind of just thinking of what to do, and then she hears the bells or whatever and she starts to fly. Somebody spliced that or whatever sound she hears with Nuck If You Buck. Like that she hears the song Nuck If You Buck. So then she starts flying and destroying everything. And that's the only thing that got me through that terribleness, because I was like, I see it.
But I mean,
See,
that's a really good
we're not the
example
only
of
ones.
like if you didn't plan it out, like if you don't know how many books you're writing for that series.
Sheena. What happened? Sheena.
Oh, Sheena, you froze.
Yeah. Just all sorts of technical difficulties tonight.
Is it a full moon or something?
Oh, Sheena, come back to us.
Nice.
She's probably just talking and
Mhm.
Just keep going and going and going. Well, until she returns.
Well, I'd like to, you know, we're talking about the importance of pacing your books out, and one of the things we're talking about here is, I guess, overall book arcs. The importance of having kind of an overall arc and knowing what that is ahead of time. Now, I must confess that I have only, I've only written the first 2 books of my series. I'm currently outlining the 3rd book, and so I'm not fully sure where my main character's journey is going to end. But I know that I'm only doing 3 books because Mercury has been through it, and I don't think I should put him through more than
Let him rest.
what will happen after these 3 books. So I think that's important to be able to pace those out. Do you write it as, one inciting incident can be the same for the entire series? Or do you think that works where you have an inciting incident per book and the characters kind of, I kind of liken it to, if we're watching a series, how they have the monster of the week type shows where you each week they're battling a different monster and then that's it? Or do you have kind of a through line throughout the whole series of some big bad that's maybe in the periphery that they're fighting?
I would say, it'll depend on the type of story itself, but personally I would prefer like just there is some cohesive element. So one big bad, everything building up to that final big boss, that sort of thing. Because I think Brandon Sanderson does that, where in Mistborn, where he has, the big bad in that book isn't really the big bad over the entire series. Spoiler alert, but so, but he kept it interesting because he managed to basically keep the reader guessing. You thought it was the big bad because it followed certain tropes, so you would expect that, oh, this person's going to be the big bad and that's going to be the end of it, and then it's like, nah, you got subverted. Like, so off into this next adventure as they still try to defeat whatever entity that they're supposed to be defeating.
Yeah, I agree. I like it when there's a big bad and then it's not just each book is a separate, because then I feel like, what's the point of reading a series if there's not a through line? I might as well be reading Goosebumps or something where each book is different. I miss Goosebumps. That just made me super nostalgic.
Like, that was loud and clear. You just like, oh, but I like Goosebumps. But that could work though. Like,
it is. I like it though. I like reading it. I don't like writing it. Like, for me, I like the Harry Dresden and the Mercy Thompson series. They are like, they don't always have they're kind of like supernatural in a way. You know, every book is you battling something different, but everything is still like in this world. I don't like writing books like that. I try, but it don't always work out. So I guess it just depends on like your preference of like what you want to read and what you want to write. I guess you should
Yeah.
say.
Let's
I
see.
would like, because I pitched a concept to when I was
Goosebumps.
going for my master's degree, and it was basically, what if you structure, because like I mentioned, I write high fantasy, so this whole big world with a multitude of different stories. So I was thinking, like, what if you just wrote your stuff kind of like how they do episodes for television, and then you have this like 1 hour long movie. So it's like little book, like we're talking about, like goosebump type book, goosebump type book, goosebump type book, and then this hour long movie, which is your larger book where all this cool stuff happens, and then it's back to being episodic.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, like the anime.
So one thing I'd like to talk about is, and hopefully Sheena can hop in while we're talking about this, is so some tropes that lend themselves, I guess, to fantasy, and maybe ones that don't. I would say maybe something like a 5-man band, or like a so the magic words, like a 5-man band or something like that. I feel like lends itself to a series, because then you have a lot of different characters that can play off of each other, and then you can spend some good time developing them, instead of a solitary character. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but as somebody who's writing a series that is similar to like a 5-man band situation, I am having a lot of fun further developing these different characters. What trope do you think lends itself to fantasy series?
So I have a question about that one.
Hmm.
Like, okay, so in one book that I have, I like eventually there will be like the 5-man band, but can we like scratch? Can we stretch that out over the series? Like she meets such and such here in this book, and then another book she meets somebody else like that. Does that still count as like the 5-man band? Yeah. Okay. That's okay. That's
Yeah,
fine.
because at the end of it all, they need this group is required to basically bring about the conclusion of the story to defeat the big bad. So power of friendship, we need all 5 of us to destroy the big bad,
With our powers combined.
I am
Yeah.
Captain Planet.
Well, and I think it's also, I like the idea of doing it that way, because I think it you can play a lot with it of, is this person the right fit or not? Will this person align with the group or not? There can be, I think, a little bit more suspense in that situation where you don't have, you haven't collected them all, so to speak, top of the story.
That's funny. I said throwing Pokeballs at somebody.
We see, this is why tuning in is important, because you get Pokemon references, we talk about Goosebumps, you get Game of Thrones hate. See, this is what happens when we get together.
All the good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's funny.
So
Another trope?
another trope. What other tropes are we?
The reluctant hero, the one that gets chosen to save the world, but he's like, nah, I don't want to, and I guess so. Like that sort of hero. Or the evil overlord.
What is your favorite to write? Well, I know yours is like the 5-man band, isn't it? Yeah. What's your favorite one to write, Amanda?
I would say the reluctant hero. Mercury.
I see that for Mercury.
Pretty much a reluctant hero. Because I think it gives you an opportunity to make your hero a little more relatable than the one who's just super, yeah, tag me in, coach. And I think you can definitely play with a lot more in this series. Have definitely written a lot more with Mercury having anxiety and dealing with that, the side effects of that, um, which has given me the ability to write out some of and work through some of my own anxiety that I deal with. And so some of those moments where, especially in the latter half of um, Alaris, when he's having that debilitating anxiety and he doesn't want to leave his room, are definitely things that I can relate to. So I I like that, and even in the book I'm writing now, my MC is a reluctant hero because she's scared of her powers and doesn't want to use them. So I think that there's a lot of potential there to humanize your MC.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah, I was like, I like Brittany's like, I know that's right. Yep, yep.
Because no, and what I like about that, what you were talking about, because it reminded me about a group that I attended once several years ago, a writing group, and this girl, I can't remember if it was a supernatural or what, but it was a fiction book, but it was based on her overcoming, I think, some sort of grief or trauma, and you can like feel that. And I pointed that out to her when I was reading it, because there's just a certain level of authenticity that you get when an author embeds something, their experiences, into a story, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to an author who just did superficial research. There's just that sense of authenticity that you
Yeah.
don't get with the latter. Like, and that's what I really like. So that's why I'm over here nodding and smiling. Like, you can pick up on that because, and I think it might be because of those finer details, because you have that experience. You can put in those little details that people who don't have anxiety or whatnot really won't be aware of or won't know. But it makes it relatable to others who do have it.
Yeah. And I definitely think that it's been really, oh God, I think it's just been really helpful. Um, yeah, it's been really helpful. Not helpful. It's been cathartic. It has been nice to be able to write that and to connect with other people who are like, yes, I feel the same experience. And to a certain extent, helpful because I am showing, hey, this is what happens. And I definitely plan on being consistent. Mercury's anxiety has been a consistent through line throughout the first books, and it will not let up in the third book. He's not going to get off that easy. He's not going to wake up suddenly and not have anxiety.
Poor Mercury.
That's. I wish that's how it works.
Right.
Mm.
Unfortunately not.
Nope.
It's
How
a
was it
long.
writing from a male's perspective?
Ooh. Um. It's interesting. I. It's. It's just it. Yeah. It's interesting. There's definitely some nuances there that I had to add, obviously not being a man. But I was heavily inspired by one of my brothers who I keep telling him, he keeps getting a big head to where we had a party and he was like, I inspired Mercury. He was just walking around telling people, I inspired Mercury. And it's like, cool. Like he said, it's my mom, and my mom was like,
Okay.
and? So,
I love your mom. She's so nonchalant.
but I think that's definitely been helpful is having a male relative, having a brother that I'm close to do that. Hey, she's back.
Hey, girl.
Hey, joys of living in the country. Oh my God. Hey, so what question are y'all on now?
Well, we're talking about tropes that lend themselves well to fantasy series, and we have spoken about the five-man band, the reluctant hero, and I think Brittany, you had said something about an overlord. But what tropes are you liking for a series, Sheena?
I like anyone that is not dealing with a love triangle. So, like, I know that covers a lot, but when I read books that don't have a love triangle, there's always the second best guy who might be jealous of the hero, or the hero who might be jealous of the quote unquote bad guy, but they're both in love with one girl. Like, can we not like any other trope but that one? Any other
What you
one?
trying to say, Sheena? What you trying to say?
I'm just
Well,
saying.
is it technically is it a love triangle if not all of the characters are in love with each other? Isn't technically it a love corner or a love sandwich or something if the two males are in love with a woman but they're not in love with each other? Because when I think of triangle, I think it's like reciprocated all the way around. So
Oh, that's true.
I'm trying like, what's
I
a
was
love sandwich? I ain't heard of that one. Like, what you doing
I
out here in the
was trying to
streets?
think of it as like maybe a
The
love corner.
person that they both love is the meat, you know, or
Oh,
the avocado, and
I'm like,
then
my internet
everybody
was
else
down for
is
5
the
seconds.
sandwich.
And here y'all are.
Yeah, because it feels inaccurate to describe a love situation like that as a triangle when there's not. Now, I would love to see a fully realized triangle where you do have, that sapphic element, or you have the queer characters where all three of them are in love with each other. But
Oh,
I'm trying to think, do I know any
that's
stories
true.
that do that?
I was like, I don't think I do.
it's a
It's a less than inside.
sunshine. Here we are. See?
I like that. Oh, that's too
Oh.
funny.
Wouldn't it be a harem then, like 2 to 1? Like if the two guys like the one girl, or reverse harem?
Does it have to be like more than like? Wouldn't it have to be like one more guy for a harem? And is harem now a, I guess, improper? Because I've been seeing that on TikTok lately, where like people are upset at the use
I
of
heard
like
that too.
harem. Like, is that a thing
They
now?
didn't like saying it. They didn't like that wasn't a proper term or something like that, right?
Yeah, but
Oh,
what was the other term that they were going to use for that? Which is fine if there's another term.
Mm.
I just need to know that way if I ever
Right, so we
decide to
can use
write
it
one of
properly.
those.
Oh, y'all, I don't know.
But also, I can't. Okay, I can't really speak for the group, but also like I feel like sometimes some people get things like mixed up because when I think of harem, I always think of like the vampires, and they had like all of these like women and men, just there for their loving and blood taking and all that, and then versus like being poly.
This book is
Right?
on my list.
The
I
Iron
cannot wait.
Window has an actual triangle. Oh, hold on, girl. Let me
We
write
might
that
all have
down.
to get that one up.
The Iron Widow.
I
Okay.
can't wait to read this. It's on my list.
Oh,
Yeah, I definitely would want an actual. So,
I don't know. My people don't have a love triangle. We don't know what Modric doing. He's just there.
One
He's
of
just
you
trying
has
to get his
unrealistic
wife.
expectations. Throwing it out there. Like, nobody's in. There's no triangle. It's just him perceiving that there might be a triangle. There's no triangle. He just has
He's just
expectations that were
there
there.
like trying to get his foot in the door anywhere he can get it, and it's okay.
It's like meeting a guy that tells you that you've been dating for 6 months and you don't even know who it is. Like, who are you? Why are we even talking right now? Like, but don't you know me? No, of course I don't know
No,
you.
I don't, sir.
Hmm.
That's funny.
so I guess moving on to, our last, I guess, two questions here because we're here over an hour, but this topic is just too juicy. And everybody watching, I hope you're finding this helpful. We are doing quite a bit of stream of consciousness happening, but I hope everybody's enjoying what we're talking about. So let's talk. We've spoken about tropes, but let's talk about characters specifically. So, what characters do you think are needed to move a story along? What type of character arcs work? I think kind of related to like a reluctant hero character arc works for a fantasy series. What else works? What type of character?
a proactive one,
Mm-hmm.
or else there's the risk of the story just kind of stagnating. So
Right.
either the plot needs to be proactive or the character needs to be proactive. Like, because otherwise it's just going to be kind of boring.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I personally not liked in characters, and that might be because I'm watching The Blacklist, but I noticed this in a lot of stories. If you're going to write your character one way, if you are not going to create the character development to make them another way, please do not. So, like in this case, I'm watching the heroine, and she's supposed to be a badass character, but they make her do really weak things that someone who is this much of a badass wouldn't do. Like these are mistakes that somebody would make. So it's either over here being overly emotional and there's no reason for it. So unless you're going to write the character in such a way to where they're developing these emotions or they're getting in touch with their emotional side, you can't all of a sudden have them break down crying and expect there to be the same impact. Like that doesn't make any sense.
Mm.
Yeah. I think that's also that goes into the whole like why are you writing a series in the first place? Right? Why is what you're writing a series instead of a standalone book? And
Mm-hmm.
that's probably one of the first questions you should ask yourself, and then decide how long your series should be if you decide it should be a series. And then make sure you have enough development uh, that you plan to develop your characters enough for the series, and that it's not like you want them to have this arc where they go from reluctant hero to certified badass, but then they get that in book 2, and then book 3 is like where they go from reluctant hero to certified. What's happening? I think it's also important to you know I don't know, make sure you have the right sprinkling of side characters and that you're kind of developing them as well.
Oh, it's nothing
Yes.
worse than having some bland side characters.
Yes.
Are the
Oh my
opposite more
gosh.
interesting than the main character? And that's also really
Oh,
unfortunate
Yeah.
because I love me some side characters. I'm like,
that's
oh, we ain't done
true.
with that main character story yet.
So that's
When you
my
rooting for the
feeling.
other people to get together, ugh,
That's
Yes.
my vibe when I watched Vampire Diaries. I don't care about Elena. I care about Bonnie. I eventually
Elena
started
was
caring
so
about
boring.
Caroline, Klaus, Damon.
Hmm.
Like I cared about most of the side characters, and then when Elena was on screen, I'm like, okay.
Girl, go somewhere. Her and Stefan. I didn't like Stefan either.
I
Mm-mm.
was okay with Stefan except in the middle of his story arc. Like, I don't know what the writers were doing. I don't know if they wanted to draw attention away from Damien, so they made him like dangerous. That way, more people would like him. But it was such a waste of time. Like, there
It
wasn't
Hmm.
any need
was.
for him. Like, if he was going to be the good character, then we needed him to be the good character. You didn't have to make him a serial killer just for the heck of it. Like, why? So you could see the
Hmm.
dangerous
Like it
Stefan.
did. It still
Who
didn't even
asked for
fit
that?
him.
Hmm.
It didn't even fit his character. So it was just
Mm-mm.
like they made so many mistakes. It's okay though.
Well, so what examples do you think that have done this well, where they've properly developed their character over a series? And we can even consider we're even talking duologies, right? Because a series isn't necessarily it could be a duology and then they're on. So what examples do you think are good examples of proper main character development, proper secondary character development, proper, um, I guess, maintaining tension, because that's another thing too, is that you're maintaining tension throughout your series. What examples would you say are good?
Slicky Stackhouse. I liked them. I liked everybody in the story. Did I like the way it ended? No, we ain't gonna talk about that.
They
But
had me at season 3. Season
I
3 was
liked their
where it all
development. Yeah, even like the books and the show. Like I liked everybody's development in there. There was, of course, there's gonna be characters that you like more than you like, the others. But I didn't feel like I felt like Slicky still held her own,
Hmm.
in both of them. Like I feel like she didn't get drowned out. What did she have her ditzy moments? She did, but I feel like we all have ditzy moments. So
Hmm.
I'm trying to think a story that I just really felt.
Gargoyles for me always.
Who is?
Gargoyles for me
Oh yeah.
always, because
Mm.
everybody got development, and I appreciate that they learned from previous episodes. Like one of the, I guess, more iconic developments is Broadway, and that gun safety episode. And from that episode onward, he like destroys every gun he sees.
Mm.
For those that don't know, he basically shot his friend by accident playing around with a gun. So now he's like, I will destroy all guns I come into contact with.
No, no.
Um,
Hunter was great too.
actually, yeah, that one's actually really good. Like, it's a
Mm.
series that's going on that I don't
Mhm.
mind any of the characters. Like, I literally don't
Right?
have a problem with not one of them. Like, I thought
My
they
Hero
were.
Academia.
Oh, that's true. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You don't like it?
I tried to get into that one, but I have this problem, like where I guess is why I don't read YA. If there's an age where you can have problems that are realistic, and then there's an age where y'all really don't have the money to be having these problems. So why are they problems? None of you have jobs. None of you have like. There's really no reason that you should be having these issues. And I'm just like, mm-hmm. So there's this thing called bills and student loans. So when you get those, you come back at me and we will talk about problems.
But
I don't want to hear about those little
you know
boys.
that Gone and Kilowatt are kids, right? Like
Yes.
they still out here slaying
I'm
folks.
surprised I'm still watching it. Like, no lie. Like, this is the only one that I've actually watched like that I'm just like, because I didn't watch it for that reason for a long time. And my sister's like, well, let's try it out. And I'm like, and I'm up till 3 o'clock in the morning, like, what is going to happen? Good Lord.
I think one that does it pretty well, and I've heard really good things about the second book. I've only gotten to the first. Is thus far as Raybearer, I think does a really great job with
I haven't read that one.
both developing the main character and also the secondary characters. It feels like this has like secondary and also like tertiary characters because there are so many people that you do come into contact with, but the development for all of them and motivations for the majority of the characters are clear to where it helps with the stakes and I kind of know what's going to happen. Like I said, I haven't read the second one. I've heard really good things about it. It's gotten pretty good reviews, the second one. So I would say that's definitely one that I think works.
So if you're introducing like a ton of characters, what is like a good like what is a proper amount of time or I guess page space before you introduce like everybody? Or for before you introduce another one. So if I'm introducing Sheena in chapter 1, and she's there for like the first 5 pages, when can I introduce Brittany? You know what I mean? Like how do you differentiate those? Like, is it like a personality thing? Is it like, are you describing what they're wearing? That kind of thing. Like, how do y'all do that?
I think so. I feel like it's kind of should try to flow naturally. And what I mean by that is, so in my book, in Astera, so obviously you meet Mercury first. Within the first chapter, you meet his father and his brother in short order. You get to know his father a little bit more than his brother because of one of the first conversations that he has in the book is with his father. And his father says, they say black don't crack, so what is it now? Mage don't age, which should tell you everything you need to know to a certain extent about his father, that he's black, that he makes dad jokes, and that he thinks he's funny, right? And then he's sitting shirtless, looking outside of his window, looking at the view outside of his house. That kind of establishes a little bit about who this character is. Pretty quickly after that, you meet Sloane, and you're introduced to her as, she's vaping. She's saying, hey, this white guy downstairs is wearing a beanie, but it's 80 degrees. He here for you, kind of thing. And then you meet Ellis. And I think it's just a natural flow from the different characters. When we meet Joelle and Griffin, you meet them at the same time at the party. And, they're twins, but it's they do have those distinct personalities. And then in the second book, I introduced Valeria. So it's, I think, making
Oh
sure you
wow, I say her
understand
name wrong.
Yeah, I remember that
making
character. I'm like,
making sure that that the characters have a purpose. Why do you have these characters in the book? Are they there to be friends? Are they there to be villains? Are they the love interest? Like, what is the point of these different characters? And then if they are just people, hey, the waitress at the cafe, don't necessarily need to introduce them fully, give them backstory, whatever, unless they're going to play significance later. Um, think about how it goes in your life when you're walking down the street and you're going to different places. How does that? How do you come into contact with people? Often do you come into contact with your friends, with your family, with your significant other? You know, I think that's a pretty good gauge of how often you should do it. And then when you do have your beta readers or alpha readers take a look at your work, you can ask them if it makes sense.
Mhm.
So how do you weave in backstory? Are you like a big like throw the whole chunk at you kind of person, or are y'all like let me put it in like dialogue or just bit by bit? What do you do?
Bit by bit as necessary. Like only
one
things
does.
relevant. Yeah, only things relevant to the story. I'm still here. My camera just died again. But even though
Poor
you
Mika.
might, even though
Like, TWT needs to get it together.
I
Okay.
know, even though even though you may have written the entire backstory of a character and it's all interesting and fabulous to you and it's so cool, that does not mean that everything in that backstory needs to be brought out into the story. And
Hmm.
one thing that I know I like to say is that do not info dump. Nobody really wants to read a biography when it comes to fiction. If you wanted to read a biography, go to that section and grab a book.
And
Do
that's
not info dump.
yeah, and that's something that can be a trap when you are writing your series, because I know that when I wrote my first draft of Alaris, I for part of the beginning I had a chunk where I was explaining the events that happened in the last book, and in each section I was trying to recount those things so that my readers would remember what was happening. And you don't need to do that, especially in the series and as the book goes on. Um, I think it if your series is taking place, let's say, Astera took place in March, so then the second book is taking place in May, June. So there's a couple months of elapse. Talk a little bit about what your characters got into during that time that we weren't with them. And also, oh, you remember that time that we did this, blah, blah, blah. Or you got a new haircut. Yeah, I went down to such and such. Those things can inform your character. Um, and do it when it's relevant to mention it. So when Mercury talks about his mother, it's important that I mention that his mother has passed away because she's not in his life anymore. And I mention how she passed away only once. And it's kind of when he's recounting the story to somebody else. I didn't need to keep bringing that up. I didn't need to, rehash it multiple times. Um, I think if that's something that you're concerned about, having your beta readers, like telling your beta readers, hey, this is something I need you to look at, can be helpful.
Okay, so readers, I let y'all read my thing the other day. Can you tell me what went wrong? Like I knew that it was a lot of information coming at you at once, but I felt like it was also like information that was needed for the scene. So how would I break that up? I think one of you said that something about like having her like do something, like
Doing
put
things.
actions.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a mix of like breaking up the information with action. So if
Yes.
she's going to be relating this stuff to you, or she's talking about or giving information, then you also need to describe what they're doing while that's happening. Because if you're just reading the info, it sounds like they're just like kind of standing there looking at you and saying all of this by rote, as opposed to like it being just part of the natural flow of conversation that would happen if they were shelving books, or if they were cleaning a
Mm-hmm.
room, or they were walking around in the mall and looking at different things.
And you can also use dialogue to provide some of that info. So I think for me, a great example would be this power stripping scene in Alaris when Mercury is being asked, okay, I think it's Sloane or Joelle asks, what happens at these things? And both Mercury and Valeria are talking about some of the like myths and rumors that they've heard of Alaris, and that provides some context of, hey, this is something that they've seen and experienced multiple times. They're not fully sure. Then you have the ritual, but it doesn't fully go into the backstory. But it's spliced in by the council coming in. What are they wearing? What actions are they taking as it's happening? Um, you can talk about it in terms of they're looking at a picture on the wall. Oh, this is a picture of the head of council. This person said this and they did this. Oh, she has a special brooch. What is significance does this brooch play? It can be relational to other things that are happening or other people that are coming in the scene instead of just like we're reading a diary entry, which you could also do that too as your info dump if
But
you
she's
wanted to
not
provide
like
info.
everybody that's in her world already knows like all of the rules and all of the backstory, but the backstory is mostly for like the reader to understand in that scene. So I have, with the way I fixed it, or I tried to fix it, was like gosh, I don't remember. I think they were at a party or something. So I put it as like she would have this stream of consciousness, but also like then she'll like stop and take a picture with somebody or something like that. Like kind of just telling what she's doing. Oh yeah, she was at a ball. Was kind of what she was doing at this ball. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe something you could
Yeah.
do. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Something that you could do for that is that since she's at a party, instead of her relating the information, maybe have the people at the party start whispering it about her as she's going
Yeah.
through the room. So it
Mm-hmm.
could be like different, like Amanda said, different snatches of conversation. So you're living this part of the info dump, you're having her walk around and are just trying to ignore them, but she keeps hearing the whispers around her. That way
Mm-hmm.
you're still giving the information, but it's also propelling the story along.
Yeah. And that can
Hmm.
help with some character development too. If, say, you have the town gossip who ends up playing a role in the story,
Mm.
they're the ones that are like, well, girl, she did this. And then turn around and be like, hey, you look so great. That helps with that character because we all know somebody like that. So
Hmm.
that will kind of do that double duty there of info dumping and
Yeah,
also providing some character development
that makes
um,
sense.
too.
Sounds
Yeah, I
like
think
me.
I'm
I'm
gonna
that
try
person.
that.
Just like, yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna try that because she's talking to Simon's sisters in that scene, and then she kind of like sneaks away, and then she starts saying like, "This is why they are all like nah, 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 nah." So okay, I can see that. I can kind of weave that into like their conversation. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, thanks. Y'all look
This is
great.
Yeah.
why having a writing community is the great.
Yeah.
I mean, that very much segued into, what our the last kind of question was, which was, how do you go about writing a series and when do you provide insight and information? And when do you do that between stories, right? Because I think it's helpful to provide at least some little tiny bit of a recap of what happened in the first
Mm-hmm.
book or the prior books, but not do it in a way that it ends up being the whole first chapter is just a recap. Because then the readers can feel, if I wanted that, I would just read the other book. But
Right.
it's helpful because you don't know how long ago they've read the first book. You can't assume that your reader's reading them back to back. Um,
Mhm.
so providing a little bit of context there helps. Like I have, like you said, snatches of context when, in the book when they're going to get the identity tags that they have to wear, talking a little bit of backstory there. when Ellis comes in wearing a really busted Halloween costume and Mercury makes fun of him. I provide some backstory there of, well, Ellis's parents cut him off. I could have put all of that in one area, but I dispersed it throughout the book so that by the time you're done reading the book, you know what happened in the first book, you know what's happened to the characters in between the first books, and then I will do the same in the next book as well.
Sheena, what about you? What did you do?
So yeah, so for the second book, you're gonna get 1 page. I'm sorry, that sounds like a lot of work. So like, I love the way Amanda writes because when she describes something, you literally can tell what it is immediately. I'm not doing that for y'all because I can't do that for y'all. So what I do in return is that when there's information that needs to happen, it comes with a level up. That way we can get through that. You'll hear it, and then we won't discuss it until something else happens. You're like, oh yeah, that happened back there, leading to this.
Mhm.
The characters in my story don't have large amounts of backstory. Like, if you meet them, you need to know one thing, and that's where they came from, because that's going to be important later. But other than that, that's very minimal backstory.
That's true. We didn't get that much backstory for Gabriel, but I still like understood who
Yeah.
his character is or was. So yeah, that's interesting.
And I think that's a
Yeah.
lot because, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Amanda.
No, I was gonna say, like, yeah, you wrote the way that you wrote it is you knew exactly what type of person he was. Like as you're spilling information, as we're reading about who he is and his actions, I know what kind of person he is, and you can kind of flesh out his backstory to a certain extent based on the kind of person that he is in the present. So I appreciated that he's still a well-rounded character without necessarily having to know what happened to his parents and did he skip
Yeah.
college
I
and all that stuff.
I feel like backstory for a lot of time is to make, and this is not true for everybody, but I feel like it's trying to humanize a character that doesn't necessarily need to be humanized. So, like,
Mhm.
if, like, Maleficent, if you were, like, I'm a fan of the old school Maleficent, like Disney cartoon Maleficent, where she had the prince in a dungeon, wasn't going to let him out until he was 80 to go wake old girl up. That's the Maleficent that I love. What they did was take her story, and then all of a sudden she's like babysitting kids in the forest. And all of a sudden she's got a daughter. And I'm like, what? Why did y'all do that? There's no need to, not all villains have to have, or even heroes have to have a backstory. They may have just woken up and said, you know what? I'm going to be good today. Or I'm going to wake up and, you know what? We're going to watch this whole world burn. It doesn't really matter that he
Yeah.
got a ham sandwich last week, because right
Mhm.
now he's about to tear up everything.
I love
Yeah.
a good baddie who's just bad just because.
I feel
I
like
read it.
villains are like a force of nature as opposed to an antagonist, which can have a legitimate backstory.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read an article that was talking about the Cruella movie, and it was talking about that of how they went out of their way so much to try to humanize her, but it's
She kills
how
puppies.
can you really,
Like,
like, how can you really humanize somebody who ends up wanting puppies for their fur? Where's the why are you doing that? And the way they humanized her was very girl bossy, white feminist kind of tease. So then it didn't necessarily help the cause because we all, she still wasn't likable. And I think it's deciding what your goals are for your characters. Do you want them to be likable? Do they need to be likable? You know, um, do you want to keep them likable throughout your series? So
Mm.
Make them relatable, I guess. Not
yeah.
necessarily likable, but you can relate.
Don't do
Mm.
that thing Amanda did where you're like really feeling that character, and then all of a sudden they turn, and then you just stumble past.
Girl.
Oh, this is some BS. I'm like, and I don't want
Spoiler.
to tell you the name of the
or do
character.
it,
She said,
or
I'll do
or
it.
do it because it'll
Hey,
give you, some suspense.
As a reader,
girl,
though.
I was so
Just knock
hot.
us off our
And that
socks.
that talk show scene, I was so hot. I was so angry. I was Like, I'm the only one despairing in this room right now. Yes.
Sheena, you always in despair.
I really am. I hate reading y'all's books because y'all do too much. Like,
Ma'am, you and your no happy endings. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
look, I
Come
told
on.
y'all there weren't gonna be any happy endings. I didn't lead y'all down this like lily white path, and then all of a sudden, guess what? There's no garden at the end for folks.
We
There's no
still
garden.
hope.
Yeah.
We still
So,
hope.
so I guess just to wrap this up, because we've been gabbing for an hour and a half here, and hopefully we've dropped some gems for everybody that's currently watching this and that will watch this in the future. But I guess if you had to end this with one final tip for those writing fantasy series, what would your tip be?
Research.
Yeah.
Still do your research. I don't care if you're writing fantasy. I don't care if you're making stuff up. Still do your research.
That's true.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to think. Just keep writing. Like, don't like if you want to edit a little bit, okay, but don't try to go back back to the whole chapter. Like, if you see something's wrong, fix it, but don't go any further past that. Just keep writing until you get to the end, and then you'll see what you have, and then you can go back and take out what's necessary. But if you get bogged down in like the minute details in the beginning, you're not going to finish.
Yeah, I agree.
I guess to piggyback off that a little bit is when you see those things that bug you or that come up, just like make a little comment for it or highlight it so you can come back to it later on, and not necessarily, stay there to fix it. Or if you're stuck on the scene and you don't know where to go, just write down like, she is supposed to cross this bridge and I'm going to make sure that she crosses it and has a little bit of trouble when she crosses it, and then go to the next scene that you're aware of and that you're sure of and that you're going to write. So don't get stuck on the fact that you can't visualize the scene right away. It's okay to just write, a little filler that says she's going to cross this bridge and she's going to have some trouble crossing it. So
I agree. I would probably say that make sure that you've got some good amount of tension throughout your whole series and try to end your series overall. I don't necessarily I want to say on a high note, but I don't necessarily mean that to be happy. I mean, your tension should consistently be going this way as you're writing your series and not this way as you're writing your series, because then your readers won't stick with you. An example that I will give is not fantasy, but it is horror, and I recently did the video, is The Conjuring 3, where the villain in the third movie is not scary at all. I had no nightmares. He's a human, and I feel like if you're going to end your trilogy with a villain that can be killed with a rock, where your first movies required like an exorcism and all that kind of stuff, then you're not doing it right. So I would say make sure that you're doing that. Find a writing community that can help you to make sure that happens. Because it is hard. It's hard to write a series. It's not easy. We applaud you for doing so, and don't be afraid to ask for help. So, yeah. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this Halloween Eve special. This has been Josephine Baker. I forgot to explain up top what my costume is. You probably thought I was a magician the whole time, but Josephine Baker.
Did you show your cigarette?
Oh, I didn't even. Hold on. This is Josephine Baker.
That makes you definitely look more like a magician.
This is why I didn't grab it. Here, how about this?
That is cute.
This is Josephine Baker / Marlena Dietrich, aka Amanda
You did a good job.
And we're here with the ladies of the Right Talk. Ladies, if you want to sign off before we sign off, say goodbye. Where can we find you on social?
Oh yeah, there's all of that. So, like, we're the Right Talk at all of our platforms. So I think it's the Right Talk. Like, if you look up Google, you don't have to use the BLK, right? It's just the Right Talk. Yeah, so we're
Yeah.
The Right Talk on all of our platforms. That's Instagram. Oh gosh, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and
Pinterest.
TikTok. I'm sorry.
And
Oh,
Pinterest.
Pinterest too. Mm-hmm.
And Twitter.
And
We're
Twitter.
everywhere.
We're everywhere.
They are everywhere. Yes, and if you want to find me, it's Amanda the Author at Instagram and TikTok with 2 E's, and Amanda the Author with 1 E on Twitter. And there it is there. We hope y'all have a good evening. We hope you have a good Halloween tomorrow. And we'll catch y'all later. Bye.
Night.